In the 1920s, in the rugged mountains of northern Morocco, one of the most unlikely nations in history was born. It wasn't a great empire. It wasn't backed by a modern army. Instead, it was a tribal confederation of Berber clans, led by one man who defied two of Europe's colonial powers. His name was Abd el-Krim. His fighters would annihilate a European army at Annual, create a functioning republic in the Rif Mountains, and force Spain and France into a brutal colonial war. This was the Rif War, a forgotten conflict where guerrillas defied empires and, for a time, won. Since 1912, Morocco had been divided between French and Spanish spheres of influence. France controlled the richer central and southern areas, while Spain was left with the poor and mountainous north. Spain's presence in the Rif region was shaky at best. The territory was difficult to govern, the local Berber tribes were fiercely independent, and the Spanish administration was riddled with corruption. Soldiers were poorly supplied and morale was low. For decades, the Rif people had resisted foreign domination. Into this tense atmosphere stepped Abd el-Krim. Born in 1882, he was educated in both Morocco and Spain. He spoke multiple languages, worked as a teacher, and even as a civil servant under the Spanish. But disillusioned by colonial arrogance and determined to free his people, he turned against his former employers. By 1920, he was uniting the often divided Rif tribes under his leadership, instilling discipline, and preparing for war. In 1921, Spanish General Manuel Fernández Silvestre launched a major push into the Rif Mountains. Confident and reckless, Silvestre advanced deep into hostile territory, establishing a string of vulnerable outposts far from supply bases. His army, around 60,000 men, was stretched thin. Most were poorly trained conscripts. On July 22, 1921, Abdel-Krim struck. Thousands of Rifian fighters swarmed the Spanish positions around the town of Annuel. The Spanish front collapsed almost immediately. Silvestre ordered a retreat, but panic turned it into a rout. Soldiers fled in chaos through the mountains, pursued by Rifian guerrillas. Entire units were wiped out. Ammunition and artillery were abandoned. Around 20,000 Spanish troops were killed or captured in just a few days. General Silvestre himself took his own life rather than face capture. But the disaster wasn't over. Thousands of survivors fled eastward, trying desperately to reach safety. Exhausted and pursued through the mountains, they regrouped at the fortress of Monte Arowit, about 30 kilometers from Melilla. For nearly 2 weeks, around 4,000 men held out against Rifian forces under scorching heat, short of water, food, and ammunition. When the situation became hopeless, General Navarro agreed to surrender on the condition that his men would be spared. But once the Spanish laid down their arms, discipline among the tribal fighters broke down. The result was a massacre. Nearly the entire Spanish garrison was killed. Only a few dozen survivors reached Melilla alive. The name Monte Arowit would forever be linked with Spain's humiliation in Morocco, a tragedy that shook the army and the public alike. The defeat stunned Spain. Newspapers raged, politicians argued, and the monarchy was shaken. How could tribal fighters annihilate a modern European army? For Abdel-Krim, Annual was a turning point. He had captured huge stockpiles of weapons and ammunition, transforming his guerrilla army into a modern fighting force. And with victory came the birth of something new, a republic. Unlike many uprisings, Abdel-Krim did not settle for endless raiding. He declared the Republic of the Rif, with himself as president. This wasn't symbolic. The Republic had a parliament, taxation, a rudimentary school system, and attempts at foreign diplomacy. Abdel-Krim wrote to the League of Nations asking for recognition, though none came. The Republic became a beacon for anti-colonial movements worldwide. In Egypt, India, and Indonesia, newspapers praised the Rifian struggle. Abdel-Krim was hailed as a hero who proved that colonial powers were not invincible. Meanwhile, Spain was forced back to its coastal enclaves, clinging to fortified cities like Melilla and Ceuta. But Abdel-Krim was not finished. By 1924, his forces expanded southwards into French Morocco. In battles at Ouargla and elsewhere, French colonial troops suffered sharp defeats. Paris panicked. French generals feared that the rebellion could spark a wider anti-colonial uprising across North Africa. To crush el-Krim, France committed a massive force. Over 160,000 soldiers, including Foreign Legion units, Senegalese tirailleurs, and Moroccan auxiliaries. Spain also reinforced its side with tens of thousands of men. The stage was set for a joint campaign against the Riff Republic. In 1925, Spain and France launched a massive counteroffensive. The most decisive battle came at Alhucemas Bay in September 1925. Spain carried out the first large-scale amphibious landing in history, using more than 13,000 troops, naval support, and aircraft. It was a preview of the tactics later used in World War II at Normandy. el-Krim's forces fought ferociously, but they were now outnumbered and outgunned. Spain and France unleashed overwhelming firepower, artillery barrages, aerial bombing, and, most infamously, chemical weapons. Mustard gas was dropped on villages, poisoning civilians as well as fighters. The war turned into a grim war of attrition. Despite their bravery, the Riffians could not hold back two modern armies indefinitely. By May 1926, the Riff Republic was collapsing. Villages were destroyed, food supplies cut off, and the population suffered terribly. Unwilling to see his people slaughtered, Abdel surrendered to the French. He was exiled, first to the island of Reunion, and later allowed to settle in Egypt, where he lived until 1963. The Riff Republic had lasted just 5 years, but its impact reached far beyond Morocco. The Rif War showed that guerrilla fighters could defeat modern armies, at least for a time. Abdel inspired anti-colonial leaders across Africa and Asia, from Ho Chi Minh to Gamal Abdel Nasser. For Spain, the war left deep scars. The humiliation of Annual and the brutality of the campaign fed discontent that would later explode in the Spanish Civil War. For France, the war was a warning of the limits of colonial power. And for Morocco, the Rif War became a symbol of resistance. A chapter where tribes in the mountains defied empires and almost changed history. The Rif War left deep scars on everyone involved. Both sides committed terrible atrocities. Thousands of prisoners and civilians were massacred in the chaos of the conflict. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more history that often gets overlooked, hit subscribe and join for the next one.